project that is simple and functional, and I think you'll really like it. This is a project great for both beginning sewers as well as more experienced sewers. It's very functional. So it's a bag, it's a little bag with a little piece of leather on the bottom of it, which I'll tell you all about in a moment. And it has a drawstring in it that allows you to pull and close the bag. So if you've never made a drawstring like this, you'll find out how to make them, and you'll be making them all the time. And this is, like I said, this is a great little bag for if you've got a gift for somebody. You can give them the gift and a little bag. It's great for using up scraps if you have that. It's great for beginning sewers and can be put together in a jiffy. So come join me at my sewing machine and I'll give you a few more details and we'll get started on our project today. Leather, I will leave a link down below in the video so that you can see that in the comments below. And then you'll need 2 pieces of fabric cut 12 inches by 10 inches. And these are going to be the main part of your bag, and the leather, of course, is going to be on the bottom. And then finally, you'll want 2 pieces of ribbon. This is, I think, 3/8 inch grosgrain ribbon, and about 24 inches long. You could make it a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, just depending on how long you want the ties to be when the bag is closed. And we'll look at that once we get it made, and you can see. Let's see, in terms of other materials, just thread, sewing machine. You'll need a safety pin to thread the ribbon through the casing when we get to that part. And probably, if you're like me, a seam ripper. I always say, if I'm gonna sew a project, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna have to unsew part of the project with my seam ripper. And here on Sewing with Christine, we show the mistakes so that everybody can learn from mistakes other people make. And we'll see how today goes. Maybe today will be one that I don't have to use the seam ripper, but I have it just in case. So here we go. So now what I've done is I have laid my fabric and my leather flat on my sewing surface, and I have smoothed with my fingers. I've finger pressed my fabric towards the right. I've finger pressed my fabric towards the right. And I'm top stitching with a 1/4 inch seam. On my sewing machine, I am able to move my needle over so that my needle is over a 1/4 inch, and I've lined up with the left side of my presser foot here. On your machine, you may have a different way that you need to make a 1/4 inch seam. You may need to grab a different presser foot to allow you to make that 1/4 inch seam. But that's what you want to do, is you want to sew this down and top stitch it, and you're top stitching your fabric to your piece of leather here. And so when I pull this up and out of the machine, I will show you that I now have a nice straight top stitch seam, and the fabric is now top stitched to the pink leather. You can see on the back side my original seam, and then where I have top stitched it down, and that just gives it a nice finished look on both the inside and the outside. And now I'm going to turn around and do those same steps to the other side. So I have my second piece of fabric here. I've got my pink leather. I'm going to put the fabric face down on top of the pink leather, just like I did before. I'm going to clip it, and I want to sew with about a 1/2 inch seam along the other side, exactly the same way that I did on the first side here. Slightly different view than before of me sewing this 1/2 inch seam. Right along, and I'm going to back stitch at the end a couple of stitches. I probably back stitched too much there, but that's okay. And here we go. I'm just sewing this 1/2 inch seam on the other side as well. Hopefully you're able to follow along the video, and if you're not able to follow along, you're able to pause it as you finish a step and then start back with us when you're ready for the next step. So that was step number 3. And now step number 4 is a repeat of step number 2. I'm again finger pressing my fabric over to the right side and sewing along the edge of the fabric, and fold it on top of the leather to make that top stitch at about 1/4 of an inch. And again, that gives us a nice finished seam. Make this as straight as I can. And voila, we now have the whole bag. This would be called, if you're following along in the printed pattern, here is the whole bag. Hard to see with this view, but I've got my fabric on the top. Here, maybe I can show you. I've got fabric here on the top. I've got my pink leather, and then I have another piece of fabric. And now I'm going to take you to another view and we'll talk about sewing the side seams. So now I have taken the entire piece of fabric and leather that are all one, and I folded them in half along the long edge. And so I have a piece of fabric on the front. I've got half of my leather here, and since I folded it in half, the other half is here. So I folded it in half the long way, the lengthwise, which this way, the long way. And then I have made sure to match up the seams here where we top stitched. So I'm matching up the fabric here with the fabric on the top and the bottom, so that I've got those matched up nice, so that when I turn it right side out, I've got a nice clean finish there where the leather and the fabric meet. And I always like to put a little clip right there to hold that piece in place, because that's very important to get those even. It is not so important if it's even at the top, the 2 pieces of fabric here. If yours are not even at the top, don't worry about it. Make sure that they're even right here where the leather and the fabric meet. Make sure that those seams are even and together. That's very important. And now I'm going to sew along this long side, and then I'm going to flip after I have that, and I'm going to do the second side. And you can see for me on the other side, and yours might be this way as well, I've got about 1/4 of an inch of fabric that is longer than the leather. And all that I'm going to do before I sew that is trim that little 1/4 of an inch section off. It's just there because I didn't cut my fabric exactly the same length, 12-inch length, as the leather, and that's okay. Or my leather may not have been cut straight. I happen to get my leather already cut in a piece, but maybe it wasn't cut. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and sew both of those sides together, and you can watch along, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, I have it back down under my sewing machine needle here again. I'm going to sew again with about 1/2 of an inch, and for me, I'm lining up my fabric with the edge of my presser foot, and I have my needle set so that I'm going to sew about 1/2 of an inch seam. By the way, as we're going through this, if you're not sure on your machine how to get 1/2 of an inch seam, or whatever seam allowance we're trying to get, I have some videos that will show you how to do that on different machines. And so take a look for those, and you can also always feel free to comment on the video, and we'll try to give you some help as well. So I am sewing all down the length of this, and I really don't need to backstitch. You'll see why in a minute. That might feel a little strange to some of you more experienced sewers, but you'll see in a minute why backstitching is not critical on that side, on either side. So now I am trimming my other side of the fabric. I'm trimming about 1/4 of an inch off of it. If you have a rotary cutter and you want to get up and use your rotary cutter to do this, you can. I'm just cutting with my new favorite pair of scissors. I'm going to show them to you here, and I'll put a link for these too. I just like to show everybody the supplies that I'm using, and you can find something similar. Maybe you'll like them as well. This is my new favorite pair of scissors. They're just, I think it's like a 2-inch blade, but they're very sharp, and if I'm trying to trim fabric like that, or I teach a lot of lessons to young girls, and those little scissors are just great. So I love that. So on this one, I am starting on the other end. Again, I don't have to backstitch, and I'm going to show you why very shortly. And remember, I did match up my seams when I clipped, match where my leather and fabric meet. I made sure that those are matched very nicely together. And here we go. I have the 2 sides sewn together. Now comes the part that may make some of you a little bit nervous, because we're actually going to draw a square and we're going to cut out our corners, and that is going to help us make something called boxed corners. So I'm going to show you that here in just a second. All right, so I have my handy dandy little ruler here, and I am measuring, and I'm going to draw a line 1.5 inches from the fold. So down here, this bottom fold, I've got my ruler up in the corner, and I'm going to draw a line up here that is 1.5 inches from that bottom fold. So there's that line. Hopefully you can see that there on my fabric. And then I'm going to come up to that line, and I'm going to draw another line going the other way that is 1.5 inches from the stitching line. So 1.5 inches from the line of stitches. So for me, my line of stitches is right here, and I have the 1.5 inch mark on my ruler lined up with that row of stitches, and I have the ruler aligned with the line that I just made, and I'm going to make a line on this side. And now I have 2 1.5 inch marks. One is over here and one is here, and now I'm just going to connect them, and I'm going to connect these lines to make a square box, an outline of a square here, right in the corner that goes all the way from the edge of the fabric. Give me just a minute here. All the way from the edge of the fabric on this side, the raw edge. So I went ahead and marked through my seam allowance all the way up here, and then all the way to the fold here. So what's important is that this square is 1.5 inches square using the fold line and the stitch line. But when I cut, I'm also going to cut through the seam allowance. So I am cutting out this square that's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, but what I'm really cutting is a rectangle, because this is about almost 2 inches by 1.5 inches. But you'll see how this works in just a minute. Those scissors I showed you just a minute ago are the perfect size for cutting this square out. Sorry, it's hard for you to see me cut, but I have now cut that out, and don't be nervous. This is how you make the, this is exactly how you go about making these boxed corners on the bottom of the bag here. So I have my square cut out here. Please don't be nervous about it. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now on this side, the way my fabric is laid out, I've got the seam here and the fold down at the bottom. So I'm going to go again 1.5 inches from my seam allowance. Oops, I need to turn my ruler this way to do it the best way. I've got 1.5 inches from my seam line going this way. I'm going to draw my line this way. And then 1.5 inches from the fold, just like I did on the other one. And then I'm going to connect this into a square. These little rulers are perfect for that. Again, you'll have a link to all the supplies we have, but any old ruler will work. And now I have my box made on this corner, and now I'm going to cut it out. Just to clarify, you're cutting out only the leather, so make sure you're cutting on the fold, on the edge that has the fold, and you're only cutting leather. If you're cutting any fabric at this time, you're doing it on the wrong side, so be careful. Now, here's the neatest thing about making a box corner, and once you've made one, you'll love it. To get them to ready to sew, all that you're going to do is to take the two corners here. I'm taking the two corners and I'm opening them up, and you'll see your seam's gonna lay right down, and you're gonna be able to clip this together. Let me move my hand away. And I'm putting one clip on this side, and I'm bringing my other side up here. And I'm going to use 3 clips because I'm going to clip down my seam allowance, and I'm going to put a 3rd clip on it. And now you can see I have 3 clips in the corner, and all that I've done is I've taken those 2 raw edges and I flipped them out. And I'm going to show you one more time on this side with a different view, and hopefully you'll see. I'm just grabbing my corners. Here's my raw edge here and my raw edge here. And I'm just grabbing the corners and I'm going like that. And it just comes out so perfectly. It is amazing. And then I'm going to clip this here. And I'm going to clip this here. Actually, I'm going to put my clips going the other way, because I want to see that seam when I'm sewing it and make sure that I'm sewing that seam allowance there from that side seam flat. So now I have 3 clips on both corners, and I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew down each of these corners with, again, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we'll go to the sewing machine. So now I'm here down at the sewing machine, and you can see I'm sewing about a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. I've taken my first clip out, and I'm going to go ahead and sew along this corner. Now this time I am going to back stitch, and I'm going to probably do it a couple of times because that corner is going to take a lot of wear and tear. So this, and the reason you didn't have to back stitch before is you were just going to cut that back stitch right out, weren't you? But this time, this is the actual corner, and I'm going to back stitch it a couple of times. And then I'm just going to turn around and do that same stitch on the other side, on the other corner, and then we'll get together and turn our bags right side out. So here I am sewing the second corner. Again, I'm back stitching along this corner, and I'm lining up my edges as close as I can. They don't have to be exact. And I've sewn that together, and now I have the second corner sewn together. Okay, so now we have both corners sewn together, that corner and this corner. I've got a thread to trim off. I'm very bad at trimming off all of my threads. I don't know if anybody else out there is like that or not, but I trimmed off all my threads. I've got, does it look like a bag now? Great. So now I'm going to turn it inside out like this, and make this nice little boxed corner. Isn't that pretty? And now on this side, I love box corners. That's a very key part of bag making. So if you want to get into making more bags, you'll do a lot. Notice by lining up the fabric and the leather here, see how nicely that corner lined up? So my fabric lines up right across and the leather, so it has very nice and neat there. And then now, what do you think? Do you have a guess as to what we do now? I bet you do. Yes, we have to put a casing in the top to thread that ribbon through. So for our casing, we're going to turn the top of the fabric under. Give yourself a lot of room, at least 1.25 inches, maybe even 1.5 inches. Let me measure to see what I'm gonna do. I think my pattern says about 1.5 inches. Yeah, I would turn it under about 1.5 inches and iron it. And I'm not going to show you the ironing piece, but turn it under 1.5 inches and iron it. And then once you have that done, take that raw edge the raw edge in here. See, it's a raw edge over here. And fold that raw edge under 1/4 of an inch so that you've got this total fold length is 1.5 inches. Then fold the raw edge under 1/4 of an inch so that your inside casing here ends up being about 1.25 inches. That'll make it very easy to thread that ribbon through and still gives you a nice size bag. So go ahead and do that. I would recommend on these you're going to have to use some pins, and I would recommend pinning like, give me a minute to grab a pin, I'll be right back. I didn't have any pins by my machine. Here I am. I would recommend pinning like this so that your pin head is down here at the bottom. That's a little crooked. I'd probably go straight up and down, but your pin head is down here at the bottom so that as you're sewing, it's easy to pull these pins out. So pin it by taking your pin, sticking it in the part that is folded under, stick it in again. I need to do a special series, a special video on pinning. Everybody has a lot of trouble pinning when they first start, but that's how you want your pins in along. And you want to pin about every 3 inches to keep it all together nice and straight. So there you go. I will be right back with mine folded and pinned, and we'll sew the casing together. One thing about ironing is I know some people who are new to sewing, you may needed to have used your ruler and to measure, or if you're a person who likes things to be exact, you may have used a ruler to measure your turning under twice, and that's fine. You'll find as you get more experience sewing, you don't necessarily need to do that, and particularly for something like this, if it's not exact all the way around, it's really not going to make a difference. Now, if we were quilting on a quilt, certainly that would be a different ball game altogether in terms of wanting to make sure that things were exact. What I wanted to show you now is that I have actually taken the table, a piece of plastic that comes off, and many of you may have a table on your sewing machine, or you may have a piece of plastic in the front of the sewing machine that comes off and allows you to access this part of your sewing machine. And this is your throat plate of your sewing machine. And by having this opening here, it's called a sleeve arm. And you're able to, when you're trying to sew, I guess originally they were probably made for sleeves this way, but in this case we're trying to sew around in a circle, and it just makes it much easier to do. If I had my table on, I would have to make sure this other side of my fabric under here didn't get caught in while I was sewing. And this just does it for me because I'm just going to basically sew in a big circle around the top of my bag. Another thing that I want to make sure of, and this kind of goes back to the ironing, you want to make sure that you are sewing as close to the edge of your fabric as you can. So you want to get that seam allowance to as close to like 1/8 of an inch as you can. And depending on the type of sewing machine you have, there's different ways to do it. You may have different feet that allow you to align your needle up with the edge of your sewing machine. In my case, again, I can move my needle back and forth. So I have actually moved my needle so that it is going to make about a 1/8 inch seam. So on my foot, I happen to have a little mark. I love these clear feet if you have them available for your sewing machines, because it's very easy to see the fabric underneath. And I have a mark in the middle that tells me that I can guide my needle next to, and I have my needle just to the right of it. And if I guide the edge of my fabric along the middle of the presser foot and then let my needle fall where it's going to fall, I'm going to catch in all of the fabric underneath. So that 1/4 of an inch, I want to make sure that I catch that fabric so that it's caught underneath those seams. That's what I'm underneath the thread. So that this seam is attaching basically 3 layers of fabric. The top layer of the fold, the part that you folded under, and then the top of the bag. So I'm going to sew around. I'm going to take those pins out. If you pinned the way that I showed you to, I think it makes it a little easier to pull those pins out. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to sew all the way around. Now, we don't need to leave an opening because I have a little trick. And I was half joking about using what do you call this thing? Heavens, why can I not remember the name? I am getting old. But anyway, I was half joking about needing to use the seam ripper to unsew. For this project, we actually are going to unsew a little bit because I found it to be the easiest way and the smoothest way to get the straps, get the ribbons into the casing. So here we go, going all the way around. We're not leaving an opening. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to meet up with where I started. So I sewed all the way in a circle all the way around. I am going to back stitch a couple to make sure that I've got that closed up real good. I'm going to be a good seamstress and trim my little threads, and I'm going to go on the other side and I'm going to trim my threads there. And there we have a little casing that we're going to put our ribbon through. Now, one of the things that you'll want to do with yours right now is go along and make sure that you caught the bottom of the fold in all along the edge. If you find any places where maybe you didn't catch the edge of the fabric underneath, you might want to re-sew that area so that you get all of that caught in and you've got a good, clean, solid casing line here. So I promised you that we were going to use the seam ripper. Thankfully, I remember the name of this little tool. And what we're going to do is on the side seam here, and maybe a little hard to see, I'm sorry about that, since I have striped fabric. Oh, there you can see it. This is the side seam. This is the top of the casing, and it goes on down the side seam all the way along. What you're going to want to do, what I'd like you to do, is just rip out some of these stitches right in here. If you're using grosgrain ribbon the way that I am, that's about a 1/2 inch. You want to rip out, you know, about a 1/2 inch with a couple of more stitches beyond that. And you're just going to take it out of the top seam. So there's actually a seam here. And then if you go around to the back, there is a seam there as well. We're only taking out stitches in this top seam. And you're just going to very carefully rip them with your seam ripper. I'm taking out what, I don't know, 4 or 5 stitches there, maybe a little more. And we're going to do this again later to thread it through with the safety pin, but you can see I've got enough of an opening here. And again, it's only on this front side. It's only on the front. I did not rip out back here over on the back. Now you may say, well, you just ripped out those seams. The whole thing's going to rip out. And you're absolutely right. So I'm going to stick in a couple of pins. One right here at the top of where I ripped out those stitches, and one at the bottom here. And I'm going to go to my sewing machine, and I am just going to sew back and forth over the edge. So where I ripped out the seam, where I ripped out these stitches here and here, I'm basically going to go back and lock the threads back in, and I'm going to sew back and forth from the top of the seam, over top of the seam here and here, so that it won't rip out any further. I'm going to do that. Use my pin there as a mark. Let me bring you in a little bit closer here so you can see a little better. And I am just going to sew 2 or 3 stitches, go back 2 or 3 stitches. I'm going to cut my threads here, and then I'm going to come down where my second pin was, and I'm going to do the same. 2 or 3 stitches, back up 2 or 3 stitches, come forward again, lock that in there real well. And now I'll bring this up and show you what I've done. So I have actually created a little pocket right here that I hope you can see where the ribbon's going to be able to go through. So there's a little pocket there, and I've reinforced it on either end so that it's not going to rip out any further. And that's my little trick. I like that better than leaving openings on both sides. I just like the way that it looks once we get the ribbons in there, so which is our next step. By the way, once you've sewn these 2 little seams here, you're done sewing on this bag and your whole bag is done. So now I'm going to the other side of my bag. I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm finding that seam and I am going to rip out some of those stitches there. Just 3 or 4, enough. I can put my little thumb through there. I'm going to put a pin here and a pin here just to give me some guidance of where to start. I'm going to bring it up here. Notice I still have the arm off of my sewing machine so that the sleeve arm is still open. And I'm going to sew here 2 or 3 stitches back and forth, and then go down to where the second pin is and sew 2 or 3 stitches back and forth there as well. And then I'm going to cut my threads. Let me get those cut off. I'm doing a great job, since I have an audience watching, of making sure I'm getting my threads cut. And so again, I've created a little pocket where we can thread our ribbon through. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and keep the camera where it is and show you this part. So we've got a safety pin here. I'm using a huge safety pin from my quilting. You don't really need one quite this big, but this is the one that I grabbed. I am putting the safety pin through one edge of the ribbon, in case you've never threaded a ribbon or anything through a casing. So I've got a safety pin. And now I'm coming back to my little pocket. Oh, found another thread. I'm going to trim that off. Here's my little pocket on the one side. You can see I've got it held up there with my finger, my little pocket there. And I'm going to put the safety pin through. Oh, mine's a tight fit, but it'll work because I have a pretty big safety pin. And now I'm just going to keep pushing the safety pin through and pulling back on the fabric. So I push the safety pin, gather up some fabric, and then I pull the fabric on the other end. So push the safety pin and pull. And what you want to make sure that you watch your ribbon, because you don't want to pull your ribbon all the way out, all the way through. So I'm just going to keep pushing, push some fabric onto that safety pin, pull it back this way, push some more fabric onto the safety pin, pull it back this way, push more fabric. Now I've come to the other side. I've come to the other side where there is a little pocket in there. But for this side, I'm going right beyond that pocket. My safety pin is right down here, and I am continuing to wind that ribbon through. I'm ignoring this little opening, and I'm going to bring my ribbon all the way around my back. So push fabric on and pull it through. See, I'm watching the end of my ribbon because I don't want to pull this ribbon all the way into the casing. I want to have extra ribbon left. So here I go through the casing. Now I'm back to the first side where I started here. I'm back here where I started on the first side. There's my ribbon. Here's my safety pin, and I'm going to pull it up through. A little tricky. I've got to work around that seam allowance in there, but I'll be able to do it. Pull this safety pin right through there. Oh, come on. Don't prove me wrong. You can certainly do this. I gotta get my fingers in there though. There we go, there we go, there we go. Just gotta pull that seam allowance. If you're smarter than me and using a smaller safety pin, it'll be easier to get that seam allowance around. So it's really not as hard as I'm making it look here. I'm making it look much harder than it is. I really should have used a smaller safety pin. So see, every time I sew with you guys, I learn a lesson. I learned a lesson that the bigger safety pin wasn't necessarily better. So now I've got the original green thread coming out of that little hole that we made in the casing, and I've got the safety pin coming out. And now this is where you have to really be careful. You do not want to pull. You want both ends of that green ribbon coming out. So I've got both ends of the green ribbon coming out there. And now I'm going to unpin my safety pin, and then this is how I prevent from having a problem later. I'm taking the two ends of the ribbon right now, and I'm going to make a knot in them. And that will prevent them from being pulled through the casing, and they'll always be on the outside of the bag. So see, now that I have the little knot in there, I cannot pull that ribbon through the casing. Okay, and look we have it so it'll pull from one side. Now you could just have one piece of ribbon in your bag, but it's really cool to have two. So now what do you think we're going to do for the other side? Do you have a guess? So I'll tell you, we are going to put our safety pin into the other piece of ribbon, into the end of the other piece of ribbon. Here it is. I've got it again, my safety pin. And guess what? I'm going to go find that little hole. I'm going to put my safety pin right through that hole. And I'm going to, again, go around. Now remember, I started on the opposite side. So I still have my knotted ribbon over here on this side. I started on the other side. And now with the first ribbon, I'm underneath of it. So my safety pin is going through, but it's going underneath of that thread. And guess where we're going? We're going all the way over to the other side. So scrunch, scrunch. Scrunch some ribbon onto your safety pin and pull. Scrunch some ribbon onto your safety pin and pull. Scrunch some ribbon and pull. And now I'm back to this side, the side that I started just like before. I've got my second piece of ribbon coming out of here. I've got my safety pin up over here. And now, since I'm still using a big safety pin, it's going to take me a minute to get it up and under that seam allowance. But not to worry. These are handy dandy little tools. They're called a purple thing. This one happens to be blue. They're really useful. I guess the first one ever made was probably purple, but now you can get them in all different colors. And that has a little point on it that I can use to get that seam allowance around that big safety pin. Okay, so I got my ribbons, got them both pulled through on this side, just like on the other side. You can see here's a little loop of the ribbon from the first piece of ribbon is there, and that's okay. I've got my two raw edges of ribbon from the second piece here, and I am going to tie those in a knot just like I did on the first side. And now, when I pull both sides of the ribbon together, look what happens to my bag. It just all crunches up there, scrunches up, and it makes the nicest little bag. So now we have the bag, we have both sides in there. You can see it clearly here, just like on the other bag. I pull from both sides and it scrunches it up. Like I said, this is with about 24 inches of ribbon. If you want your tie strings any longer or shorter, you can certainly adjust them. And there's the bottom of the bag. And isn't that cute? And very quick to make. I know people that make these for all their Christmas gifts or birthday gifts or whatever. It just adds a little more special handmade touch to your gifts. So thanks for joining me here today on Sewing with Christine. I am going to have links to all of the sewing utensils and tools and fabrics and leathers associated with the video so that you can certainly go and find all of these materials and certainly find them on your own as well. But I hope you enjoyed sewing this little bag with me, and I hope you come back and join me for more of these little tutorials in the future. See you soon. Have a great day.